I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about idolatry, especially as it relates to guys and having a relationship. And so, yeah, this is something I've been working through lately, struggling with, and I just wanted to share what I've been learning and what I'm currently working on. And yeah, so I have struggled definitely, and I think a lot of girls have probably struggled with this, with making guys, like particular guys, an idol in your life, or just the idea of having a relationship, whether you have one or you don't. Maybe you want one really bad, or you're really attached to the one you have, and it's your everything. And an idol is anything you place more importance on than God. So if I think about that as something that's more important, and this isn't necessarily like, oh, I think my relationship with this guy is more important than God. It's not that spelled out. Usually in your mind, it might be. But generally, it speaks more in actions and your thought life, just how you're approaching the relationship, how you're approaching God. And I notice a lot of times when I'm struggling with an idol, sometimes it's because I stopped spending time with God, and sometimes it causes me to stop spending time with God. And I would say that the former is true for me most recently. So sometimes when I struggle spending enough time with God, I start to stray and start to make other things more important because I'm not giving God time. So I'm like, oh, I have to find something else to fill the God void in my heart. Anyway, so yeah, idols. They're really, really detrimental. It's, a commandment, don't have any other gods. And a lot of people think, well, I don't have a wooden statue in my home, so I don't have an idol, but you can have an idol because you're revering it. You might not be worshiping it in the sense that you're like bowing down to it or praying to it, but you might be placing a lot of importance on it. You might just feel like it's way more important than God. I think that's basically the thing I'm trying to get at, is it's something that you feel is more vital to your life than God is. So I think it's really easy to do this with guys. If you're crushing on someone, or if you're in a relationship with someone and you start to think about them all the time, and they're so dreamy and they're perfect, right? They're perfect in your mind, which they aren't. No one's perfect. But that's kind of what they become. And then that's a big sign that you're starting to make him something that he's not supposed to be. And for me, this tends to happen more with relationships than with guys. Sometimes it can happen with particular guys, but like the idea of having a relationship. I've never seriously dated someone, but I definitely still idolize the idea of a relationship and wanting to have a guy in my life, and sometimes that gets really important to me, and I spend more time daydreaming about that than I ever spend time thinking about God. And I found a verse, and some of this has to do with my dissatisfaction with not being married, and I don't mean like, oh, I want to be married right now, but my dissatisfaction that it's not quite happening yet, like I don't see it happening really soon. And I found a really good verse this morning that I guess it was last night that I really liked. It was, I have my Bible here. Okay, so it is in 1 Corinthians, and it's 1 Corinthians 7:17. I'll just read the whole passage to you. There's one part of it that I specifically like just for what I was going through, but I'll read the whole passage. 1 Corinthians 7:17 through 24. And ironically, I found this verse while I was thinking about like, oh, why am I not getting married? And I was looking at the passage concerning the unmarried, and ironically, this was right before it. And so I ended up reading this, and it was what I needed to hear, not the other passage. And so it says, nevertheless, each person should live as a believer in whatever situation the Lord has assigned to them, just as God has called them. This is the rule I lay down in all the churches. Was a man already circumcised when he was called? He should not become uncircumcised. Was a man uncircumcised when... Oh, sorry. Redid that. Okay. Circumcision is nothing, and uncircumcision is nothing. Keeping God's commands is what counts. Each person should remain in the situation they were in when God called them. Were you a slave when you were called? Don't let it trouble you. Although if you can gain your freedom, do so. For the one who was a slave, when called to the faith in the Lord, is the Lord's freed person. Similarly, the one who is free when called is Christ's slave. You were bought at a price. Do not become slaves of human beings. Brothers and sisters, each person as responsible to God should remain in the situation they were in when God called them. And I don't mean, you might be reading this and like screaming inwardly because it says, remain as you were. And, you know, like I was saved when I was in second grade, and I was definitely single in second grade. You know, but that I don't think that's so much the key to this as the first part of this. Nevertheless, each person should live as a believer in whatever situation the Lord has assigned to them, just as God has called them. I really think that's a powerful verse, that we should be living as a Christian, whatever situation we're in, whether it's the one we want to be in or not. And later it talks about slaves. And let me be clear, this isn't talking about the slavery that if you live in the United States, you're very familiar with the story of slavery in our country. It's a terrible, tragic story. And I don't want to equate the slavery that's referenced here in the Bible with that. It was different back then. You weren't a slave for life, and you either went into it for various reasons. It wasn't based on your race. It was you might have owed a debt to someone. Sometimes you went into slavery as a choice because you were poor, but it wasn't permanent. So I think that's interesting to point out that he says, you know, be content there, but if you can gain your freedom, do so. So I think that shows that we don't necessarily have to remain where we are. So if you're single and you want to be married, don't feel like this is telling you, no, you can't ever get married. I think it's telling you that you should be living as a Christian where you are right now. And you shouldn't wait to start living for God, or being content with God or spending time with God until you have whatever situation you want. And everyone always says, especially with regard to like marriage, you don't change when you get married. You don't become a better person. You're still the same person as you were before. And I think that's kind of the same thing. You won't change because you got a relationship. You won't suddenly start spending time with God. You won't suddenly become a Christian. You know, you don't need to put off that person that you're supposed to, the person you're supposed to become just because you aren't in the situation you want to be in. That should start right now. You should be spending time with God and thinking about that right away, not waiting on something that is a desire. So I just felt like that was a really good passage. I found that this morning. I'm going to try and memorize 1 Corinthians 7:17, which is that first verse. I really like it, and I want to, keep it with me all the time so that I remember it. Because I definitely struggle with not only being single, but knowing how to function in my singleness. And sometimes I don't want to function in my singleness. I want to just get a relationship. Like, forget functioning. Like, why would I don't care. Like, I just want to be in a relationship. But the fact is that I can't control that. You can't. And even if I could, I should be content where I am. And not that I shouldn't have ambition, but that I should be content where I am and willing to do God's will. And my mom, I was talking to my mom about this, and she was single for most of her 20s, and she really wanted to get married. So she's definitely, I'm 19. She was 28 or 29 when she got married. So she definitely waited a lot longer than I have so far. And I really appreciated the wisdom from her saying that you should be using this time right now to be serving God in whatever capacity it is. And a lot of people think that means like mission work, things like that. She mentioned that. I don't think you can. I think that's a wonderful thing to do. I don't think it necessarily means only that. You definitely get put in a unique position when you're single. You aren't tied down and having to like accommodate another person's schedule and needs into your own plans. But I think that more the point is just doing what God is calling you to do. So finding out what that is and then being willing to do it while you have the opportunity to be completely free for God. So yeah, that's what I've been working through, praying about. It's hard. I definitely get lonely sometimes, and sometimes I just want to be grumpy and I want a relationship. I want to get married. But yeah, so that is what I've been working through. I really like that verse. So keep it in mind. 1 Corinthians 7:17. Here, I'll read it again. Nevertheless, each person should live as a believer in whatever situation the Lord has assigned them, just as God has called them. So yeah, that's it. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.